Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Diana Cregan. Diana, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Thomas. So I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm a career coach who is really dedicated to supporting those women who put their career on pause to stay home and raise a family to get back to the workforce. It's often incredibly overwhelming and a real struggle to even understand where to begin. And having been in that situation myself, and then combining my recruitment background as well as my coaching for executive and career and life coaching, that was the end point of all of that experience and all of that work, that there was such a need to support these women.
Well, the topic of discussion today, if you're still happy to talk about it, is confidence. Happy to talk
sure.
about that?
Yes, absolutely.
So, if you're talking about it, and I already know it's an issue, but it kind of highlights a problem. So why do you think that confidence is a problem in society?
Well, in society in general, a big part of it, I think, comes down to expectations and understanding of our expectations and where these come from. And if we feel like we're working towards a particular outcome that is set for us, or that we are unwittingly setting for ourselves, if we don't feel like we can achieve it, then we start to feel like we don't have the capacity for it, and our confidence starts to diminish. When it comes to, confidence in the mums that I work with, it's a really fascinating scenario that I see played out over and over again, because even though they may have come from really successful backgrounds, successful doing anything, any kind of commercial role that they had, once they step away from that, it's not even dependent on how long, because you would think maybe someone who's been out of the workforce is lacking confidence so much more than someone who's only been out 8 or 12 months. But in fact, it's almost exactly the same. They say the same things, they experience the same feelings, and they're living the same journey over and over again. And for them, because they all kind of benchmark that has been around them in a commercial sense, whether it's performance reviews, annual reviews, client feedback, peer feedback, when you're working, you have a sense of where you fit in the world. And then when you're at home, for however long that period is, any kind of benchmark is gone. So you're kind of operating in a vacuum, and you tend not to think about going back to work until you do. And then when you do think about going back, there's absolutely a vacuum. You've got no way of assessing where and how you could possibly fit in. And then all of the internal chatter starts up about, it's been too long, you don't have anything to contribute, no one would want you, you're too old, too much time has passed. And those confidence levels simply become more and more eroded. And particularly if they start to go down the path of doing what they think they should be doing to get back to work, which is, fairly traditional methods of going back to work, it's just not going to work from returning to the workforce. And so that confidence just diminishes even further.
Well, in my message to you before we started on the call, I sort of said, would you like to discuss confidence / self-esteem? And I think it's worth asking about whether you make a distinction between those two. So how do you feel about the differences, if there are differences? I know that people use them interchangeably anyway, but do you think there's a difference between those two?
Oh, it's a really good question, Thomas. They often are used interchangeably, and there's no doubt that they are inextricably linked. Is there a difference? Well, I think confidence and self-confidence is made up of probably more than just self-esteem, but self-esteem is a part of confidence. So I think you can take a particular path to build confidence, and you can take additional paths to build self-esteem. So yes, I think there's possibly a distinction between the two, but I do think they are inextricably linked. Yeah.
Okay. Well, part of your answer, at least to the first question I felt was there's an element of external expectations that's either put on someone or it's perceived that they're there. So how much do you think that it is actual expectations from other people versus what I refer to and others refer to sometimes as self-imposed limitations? What do you think the balance is there?
Oh, 100%. It's internal. Even if there are external expectations placed upon us that we are working towards, it's how we feel about ourselves is going to impact our confidence levels. So I actually think that, confidence is not an externally driven marker. It is entirely internally driven, which is what I worked so hard for my mums to understand, that because it is an internally driven level, it is something that they can have control over, and it is something that they can build upon. Even with the most small building blocks, they actually have the capacity to build their confidence regardless of the external environment around them. So I completely concur. Whilst we might think that when people do and say things that give our confidence a bit of a battering, it's actually our response to that situation. It's what's happening on the inside of us that actually leads to our sense of confidence and self-esteem. I agree.
So mostly you're saying it's basically all within our control to manage that.
Yeah, just our response, our reaction to whatever the situation, environment, person, circumstance is. Yeah, I do.
Okay. And do you think some of what your skills are and what you teach, do you think that applies to any time outside of a workplace? So, for example, if someone had a gap between one job and another, let's say they were out of work for 6 months or something, do you think that the confidence stuff would all still apply?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. I think because I look at it through a very particular lens in terms of the mums and the very common experiences that they face. That's who I talk to. But yes, I do. I think it is universally applied to everyone in terms of how they can take control of their own internal sense of self. Yeah.
Okay. So if someone were to say, I'm planning to go back, but I've got like major doubts, I've got self-esteem issues or confidence issues, what are the few things that you would recommend that they do, or what's your advice there to that person?
Well, I think, as I do with all of my mums, and it would be applicable to everyone, is really have a very strong sense of self, of who you are. And, I often talk about the fact that some people really resist the introspective work when they're looking for work or they're looking for a role or to get back to the workforce, because I kind of think it's a bit of a waste of time and a bit naff. But ultimately, they're going to come back. They're actually going to come back to work this stuff out if they're looking for a fulfilling job. Now, if they're just looking for work, paid work, and they simply need money to put food on the table, that's a different conversation because their needs are being met entirely differently. But if they're actually looking for work in which they are hoping to seek fulfillment, reward, challenge, personal growth, if they're looking for work that's going to make them feel good about themselves, it's really important that they have an understanding of who they are. And who they are is a combination of all sorts of things. Your values, what's important to you, what you would defend, what would you fight for, things that bring you joy. Understanding who you are is really important, because once you understand who you are, then you can combine it with, what are my skill sets? What am I really good at? What have I done in the past? Where have I excelled? Where's the evidence for that? Where's the data? And then these are some of the exercises that I take my clients through. Let's actually pull out all the data that demonstrates skills, strengths, experiences, and let's identify which ones are functional, which ones are behavioural, what's transferable, and then try and look at, okay, well, with all of this information, how do we then make sure that the things that we want to do are going to be meeting these other elements about who we are? Will I be able to meet my values, live to my values in this particular sort of environment, or fulfilling this particular type of role? Because if they're not congruent, then that sense of right place with the right people, and that will cause internal conflict. And ultimately, you won't be satisfied in the role. So the first thing is really to be working out, who am I? What is it that I want? What am I good at? Where am I going? We remove all the obstacles, and then we set a path forward to actually achieve that. But the upfront work is really important. Even if people put it off, they'll come back to it.
So how does someone go about determining what their values are?
Well, there's some really terrific online tools. I'm particularly fond of viacharacter.org. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one. It's been around for a really long time. It's a free survey. You can pay for an additional survey, but to be honest, the free one that it spits back out after you've filled out all of the information, done a questionnaire, is really helpful because it helps you articulate all this stuff that's on the inside that perhaps you don't talk about very often. So I really recommend that one as a starting place. It's a great place to start. What else to identify values? Look at things in your life that bring you joy, things that you will draw a line in the sand over, something that you will defend, something that you will fight for. And then it's identifying why. What is it about that circumstance? Why did it trigger such a strong emotion? What is it about that circumstance? Let's dig a bit deeper into what is that saying? What's that saying about you? What else do I like? There's a terrific book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an Expletive. I think it's Mark Ransom, I think. The title is really flippant and designed to be provocative, but it's actually a fabulous read. It's a fast read. I think I read it on a flight between continents, and I really got tremendous value from it. And I tell all of my clients about it. It's a very quick read, but it really boils down this notion of you've got to understand who you are and what it is that you want in the world, because then that will actually give you the direction. That will give you the focus to keep moving forward strategically. So there are a few ideas.
Good. Thank you for that. And what would you advise someone do if their values are different than the work that they're going to go back to?
Well, the first thing that I would probably ask them is there a way that you can live your values in that work environment? Because sometimes it's about the way we see things or the way we see people or circumstances. Can we actually reframe it differently so that we can find a way that it is going to be living more in alignment, or it's just going to cause less conflict? Conflict is often a clash of values. So once you start to identify your own values, and then you can start to try and work out what other people's values might be, that might help you navigate that particular circumstance. If it's something that is so fundamentally the antithesis of what you stand for, then I would suggest that we find somewhere else, or we find a different role or a different way of fulfilling that role so it is in alignment. But more often than not, it's the way we perceive or view the situation. So it's thinking about it differently, approaching the circumstances differently. But if you haven't gone back yet, let's do a lot of pre-work first before we start having conversations with people about potential jobs. It's all the pre-work again.
Good point. I know that you said the majority of it is internal rather than external, but is there anything that employers can do to help, let's say, returning mums or anyone who's had a job gap, for example? Is there anything that employers can do to make that easier?
Yeah, I do. Great question. And I would love to see it more, even people in their current jobs, not necessarily even returning to work, but in their current jobs. Clear communication around expectations around a role. What is it that we are looking for in this role? What is it that we are looking for you to achieve in this role? How competent at this point are you in fulfilling this? How competent do you want to be? Or is there some training that we can do when you go back to help you support and, build a bridge between where you're at and where you need to be? And just ongoing conversations around it. I think, we started out by talking about expectations, and that's often it. There are these expectations out there in the ether, and we've got to kind of guess them. But if everyone was just a little bit more clear in their communication of their expectations of individuals and roles and functions, I think life would be a whole lot easier.
Mm-hmm. I do think people think that they're more transparent than they are. And in reality, other people don't really know what you want and vice versa, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And, my background, a big part of my background is in emotional intelligence, which, I just find endlessly fascinating. But it's exactly that point, Thomas. People think that they're being really clear and communicating and they're just not. They just haven't found a way of being able to do it really effectively yet. And so it's helping people, be able to do that more effectively with their own people and their own families. To be honest, it's a great place to start. But that's a whole different conversation.
Have you struggled with this yourself, or is it just something that you find that you're good at? It was just the reason that you teach it.
The confidence and the self-esteem, or the emotional intelligence, or
the former. So
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why I can speak to this, helping mums get back to work, is that I can absolutely speak to it. I have a very varied background, and for much of my career, I would look back and think, what on earth is the connection between all of these dots? And then I left the workforce. My husband and I moved 13 times for his work career, and that took us from Australia to Kansas to Texas, and then eventually we resettled in Australia. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. I knew I didn't want to go back to an old career, and I was really stuck. And so I actually saw a career coach, and that's what put me on the path of professional development. And then I, retrained and went into coaching. And then as I was moving through my coaching experience, I just kept coming across more and more of these women who were exactly like me. Felt that they were competent and skilled, with so much energy and life yet to live and give. Surely I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in motherhood. There's got to be more than this. But how do I go back? So when I was attracting this woman over and over again, I was like, my gosh, there just needs to be a really simple path process for women to follow. And that's why I created it, because I can absolutely speak to it. Yeah.
And was your way of learning it a little bit, because if you're figuring it out yourself, it can also almost be like making lots of mistakes and sort of blazing a trail of your own in order to teach it. What was that like for you?
Look, I've been very lucky. Part of my background, I was working for a professional development company, not as a trainer, but actually on the operations and general management side. So I had a really good window into the world of professional development, and a big part of that was teaching people a lot of these mindset things that, I work with my mums with. So I'd had a really good exposure in the past. And then when I retrained as a coach, and then I went through my own career coaching, there were all sorts of different threads coming together. I think the benefit of working with the mums that I work with is that information just grows and expands, because it's much bigger than my experience. It's every other mum's experience that I can weave into it. So certainly learnt a lot from all sorts of different processes, but also the mums that I work with. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like there are any misconceptions around confidence?
Well, I think the big one is probably where we started, that people think that it's really as a result of external things that have happened around them. And the risk of that mindset is that they don't make the choice to take responsibility for their own emotional well-being, and confidence obviously plays heavily into that. So I think that's probably the biggest one, that it's an external thing. Secondly, that it can only be increased by external things, and so teaching them that it's actually very much an internal thing, and that there are, fundamental, basic, straightforward steps and processes that you can do to build that confidence. Once you have an understanding of, what fear is in its most, raw kind of sense, the subtlety of fear in terms of, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, these fears that are very human. Once people understand how that plays into their everyday life and how that erodes their confidence without them even realising, once you start to empower them with knowledge, they can actually start to take steps. So it's a matter of teaching them the principles and the concepts, and then giving them the activities to actually for them to undertake and do, that they will almost straight away start to see their confidence levels build. So I think it's getting them to see that you don't just get confidence from going back to work and doing the job. Yes, that will help because that's mastery, and mastery feeds into confidence. But there's actually a lot you can do before you even step foot back into a work environment.
Well, you mentioned fear. It's a topic which lots of people are interested in, and you said realizing what it is. So what is fear in your opinion?
In my mind, well, we talk about the fact that fear originally was really designed in our beings as a survival mechanism. But what we need to understand, that there's a difference between fear and danger. Danger might be real, but fear is not always real. And fear presents in people's lives in so many ways that they are simply not aware of, and they're not aware how much it impacts their thinking, their decision making, the choices that they make. So for me, it's about getting my mums to see just how much fear plays a part in their life, and getting them to recognise it and starting to pivot away from that kind of mindset that's really unhelpful and doesn't serve. So I think fear, whilst it can be helpful, and there's a place for it, it's really starting to have a level of self-awareness that you can start to think, well, actually, is that a helpful thing for me to be saying to myself, or is that actually really not? People talk about public speaking, that it's absolutely terrifying, and they're worried they're just going to fall off the stage and drop dead. Well, realistically, they're not going to die from public speaking. Yes, it might be nerve-wracking. Yes, they might break into a sweat. There are all sorts of minor things that can go wrong, but they're actually not going to die. And that kind of, that difference between fear and danger, that's kind of an example that public speaking is not a danger. It's a fear, but it's actually not real. You're not going to die from it. So it's kind of teaching them actually the power that they have over their thoughts.
Have you got any mentors that have shared this information with you at all?
Oh, gosh. Look, I do a ton of reading. My time in the professional development company was really helpful because there was just always lots of material. I love people like, Brené Brown, Amy Cuddy, I'm a big fan of. I don't know if you're familiar with Amy Cuddy. She's also terrific. She does a great 15-minute TED Talk, which is all about physiology and confidence, and the connection between our mind and our physiology, and actually which one is influencing which. It's a great TED Talk. I highly recommend that one. Gosh, I'm reading all the time. But any one particular person? No, it's across the board. I think.
Lots of mentors. That's the best way to be, probably, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that you're not regurgitating one person's point.
Yeah, one person's philosophies on life. Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned some of the strategies that you can practically apply. If you did, let's say someone came up to you and they're like, I'm really struggling with my confidence at the moment. Is there anything that springs to mind for you where you'd be like, I'll just try this and maybe it might make things a little bit easier for you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues that I find with confidence, certainly with my mums, is that they spend so much time in their head thinking and worrying about things that it overtakes everything, and they actually don't do anything. They're just in their head all the time. So what I get them to do is actually do very practical exercises, a lot of writing kind of stuff, but things like, go back to your last job. Once you sit down, what was your job title? Who were you reporting to? What was the area that you're in? What was your function? What was the purpose of your role? And then we start to pull out things like, did you ever get a promotion, a raise, some praise, some kind of positive reaction from someone? Was there a project that went particularly well? And I really get them to spend some time really reflecting and I just get them to start with their most recent job, because you can go back as far as you like, but the most recent, freshest one is often easiest. and get them to pull out all of these skills that they've actually able to demonstrate. So we look at what went well, and then we look at why did it go so well? What was it about that circumstance that allowed you to feel successful and give you the success that you had wanted or sought or that came to you? And then again, pull it apart even further. What skills exactly was I demonstrating? Was it functional, technical kind of skills? Were they behavioural skills? And really get them to see in black and white and provide the data for their brain so that the next time the brain says to them, look, you just don't have any skills. Like, you've got nothing to offer anymore. There's nothing there. Well, we can actually change that. So that confirmation bias, as a human, we look to confirm what we believe to be true already. So what's happening is if you don't have any evidence around you of the skills that you have, then the brain just keeps pulling out, well, you don't have any skills, you've got nothing there. But when you go through this exercise and it's in black and white and you were given a promotion or a raise or praise or something, then actually there must be something there. There must be a bit more depth there than I remember. And then we go back further into their past. So in the end, we've got a whole pile of transferable skills that are functional and behavioural that they can pull forward into their next role. That's probably where I start.
Sort of like visualization exercise. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, yeah. But again, out of their head. I just want to get them out of their head because it's really easy to get trapped in there for hours and hours at a time when you're a stay-at-home mum.
Or not even realise that you're doing it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you don't realise you're stuck. Lots of women come to me and they say, I just feel stuck. I just don't know how to move forward. And it's because they just don't know where to start. So let's start with something really concrete that gives them that immediate sense of, oh yeah, I was good at that. I could do that. I was actually really good at that. And those skills, yes, okay, some of them might be a bit rusty, particularly if they're technical skills, but you can always do some retraining. As I often say to my clients, what appear as insurmountable obstacles are often just logistics. So let's just work out the logistics and get you past that they can see straight away when they go through these sorts of exercises that actually there's a lot there. They've got a lot to contribute.
Mm. There's also self-development principle that I don't know whether it's the same thing, but it seems like it might be at least familiar. And that is what you focus on, you get more of. So if you're constantly focusing on the fact that you don't have any skills, then that's going to be kind of what you focus on and what you get more of. And if you focus on all the good things that you've done, then you're likely to do more good things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree, Thomas. Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything else that you think, say, mums would worry about going back to the workplace?
Oh, gosh, the list is as long as my arm of the things that they can worry about. I think expectations is possibly the most important one, that they're worried they're going to let people down, that they're not going to be good enough. So I try and get them to have not too many expectations other than those that they've articulated about going back, that they have a clear awareness of what it is that not only is their boss expecting or whoever it is that they're working with, what those expectations are in the workplace, but what are their expectations of themselves. Let's be really clear about what it is that you want from this, because that helps also set up boundaries and that sort of thing. But just getting them to understand that it's a process, and the first job going back, look, it might not be perfect. It probably won't be perfect. But as long as we're using all the information from the past, we can move forward. The past is not a predictor of the future, but we can certainly use the past to navigate what we're doing moving forward. So just getting them to see that, every step is a good step. As long as we're going forward, it's a good step.
Do you have any clients that are like thinking about time away from little ones? So like how much time that they're spending away from their kids, basically.
Oh, you mean when they do go back to work?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, because another big mindset, I suppose, issue that we deal with is guilt. Mums do guilt really well. Lots of people do guilt really well, but mums are particularly good at guilt. And one of the things that they do feel guilty about is A, abandoning the family, and B, abandoning their kids, that somehow they're being self-indulgent, that they don't have, the right to go back to work. They should be at home. There's that word should, full of obligations. There's a lot of conversation around that. That's often a really big hurdle for a lot of mums. So it's really talking through to them, A, going back to their values, what's really important to you. So how do we make sure that that's going to be in alignment? And then B, helping them see that if they want to go back to work, that they have the right to go back to work, that the more fulfilled they are as a human being, the happier they will be. And therefore, their relationship with their kids, their relationship with their whole household will actually benefit. A happy mum is a happy household, as long as there's not a disparity again between expectations between the household and the mum. But when she is fulfilled and she is happy, she is showing her kids that a mum can go back to work. So I actually think it's a really important conversation for mums to be having, because it's not about abandoning their family. It's actually about giving back even more to their family. We all want our sons and daughters to see that when they get old, when they get married, when they have a family, they can stay home, but they also have the right to go back to work if they choose to do so.
It does come back to the values again, doesn't it? So do you mind, just in case people missed it, what's the site that you recommended?
Via Character. So it's VIA Character, viacharacter.org.
Okay.
Values it's just such an important place to start, because that thread just runs through the whole process.
Like starting off with the right, going in the right direction for what your values are. Whereas
being self-aware.
Applying all those things that, strategies, but you're going in the wrong direction, then eventually you're going to end up unhappy, probably.
That's exactly right. And you'll come right back. It might take 10, 15 years, but you'll come right back to the beginning and try to understand yourself.
What are some of the other common, let's say, concerns or worries that you come across?
Oh, for mums, another really big one is how are they going to make it work in the household? Like, how on earth are they going to be able to juggle being a mum as well as being a working person? And that comes back to logistics. A big part of it is logistics. And, a lot of mums, when they come on board, they get anxious because, I say, look, I'm going to take you on a 90-day journey. And they're like, oh, I'm not ready to go back to work in 90 days. It's too soon. It's like, well, no, I'm just going to set you up. But in that 90 days, you'll know exactly what it is that you have to do. You can actually make this as fast or slow as you want, and you can make it full-time work, part-time work, casual work, volunteer work. Choose your own adventure. This is your life. So it's getting them past that sense of going back to work equals chaos at home. My kids are not ready, my husband or my wife is not ready, the school is not ready. It's working all this stuff out before. So by the time you start going back to work, and you might decide that you just want to go back 2 days a week. Okay, well, before we go down that path, how's it going to look? Let's map out the logistics. Let's look at who's doing what chores in the house. We've got, if you want to go back in 6 months, we've got 6 months to teach Johnny how to make his own bed. We've got Sarah 3 months to learn how to make a lunch. It's, as I said before, often these obstacles which appear just so terrible and so terrifying are often just logistics, and it's a matter of working them through and planning it out.
A lot of prep. So essentially you'd help people go through that process.
Yeah, just because everyone's obstacles are going to look slightly different, because their lens on the world is going to be slightly different. So it's working through with them, okay, what's terrifying you the most? Let's work this out. Let's stare this fear right in the face, and let's just pull it apart and show you that it's probably not that bad.
Is there any time that you catch yourself doing some of the old habits?
From being at home as a full-time stay-at-home mum, you mean?
Just in general. So because the little voice comes in, you can sometimes catch it, you can sometimes miss it, and then you realise, I've been talking to myself in the wrong way. Is there any?
Oh, yeah, all the time. And just because I'm a teacher doesn't mean I get it perfectly right myself. Gosh, no, it's ongoing. I get better at catching the voice and not letting myself get, really in a downward spiral. Like at the moment, I've got, an issue going on that's about technology, and it's just absolutely driving me crazy. And, I can feel myself getting really despondent and really frustrated, and I just have to catch myself because right now I'm quite sleep deprived. And I think, well, hang on, this is really exacerbated. My whole mindset's really exacerbated by just how exhausted I am. So let's just take a break and review this again tomorrow with a different eyes and start again. So I think it's that ability to start to identify, hang on, I can pull this up here. I don't have to keep going down and down. But, oh, yes, gosh. Oh, yes, Thomas, I live my own material. Don't worry.
Well, one of the things that I don't know, unconsciously do or have implemented is when you do feel exhausted, when you haven't got like a very good night's sleep or you're overly stressed, is not making any decisions until you do feel in your right mind. Is there anything, any other coping mechanisms that you use?
Oh, I think that's a really good one. One of mine is expectations. Sometimes I place expectations on myself that I just realise are not helpful. And it's when I'm in the process of realising that I'm failing really badly that I like to remind myself that I'm failing forward. And perhaps I need to review these expectations that I've set. So that's a big one for me, is really, okay, so this idea, this deadline you've given yourself, really how hard is it? How firm is it? What are the implications if you don't make this date? Is it really that serious if you just give yourself an extra 4 days or whatever it is to resolve the issue? So for me, it's being really aware of the expectations that I set for myself.
Yeah, because I have quite a tendency to be quite hard on myself, but as you say, would it make that much of a difference if you extended it out just for another few days or something?
Yeah, imperfect action too is a really big one. Like, let's just get something done. It's not going to be perfect first time around probably, and that's okay. But the next iteration will be slightly better and slightly better again. So it's not being afraid to just get it done. It might not be perfect, but it'll be done.
Well, especially if you've got expectations, it sounds like you have some goals. So as I said earlier, I always ask about goals. So would you like to share your goals with us?
I think for me, my goals are about really being able to speak to the client base that I'm building in the language that they can really understand, resonate and connect with, so that I can bring more women, into the fold. My goals are all around changing women's lives, like just getting them to see that their life is in their hands, their destiny is in their hands. And I have a vehicle for them to be able to do it. So my goals are really wrapped around these women, trying to get more of these women into the fold. I'm also, my goals are also around building, a family and a life with my family that I love living. So it's getting that balance right, and it's reminding myself, okay, it is now time to turn off the laptop and just spend some time, with my kids who are teenagers and, going through their own journey. So my goal is about getting that, balance is not really the right word. And I talk about it with my mums all the time. It's more integrating, like how you integrate being a small business person plus a wife plus a mother. How do we get the integrations right so that everyone is thriving as much as they possibly can? And then my other goals are around my philanthropic work that I do and making sure that I give myself the time and the mind space to do the work that I want to do. So there's all sorts of goals there, but they're probably three big ones. Yeah.
So what's the philanthropy that you do?
Oh, I'm part of what's called a giving circle. It's a group of women who contribute money which exclusively supports the Australian Red Cross, but it's part of a global giving circle that is for the Red Cross globally. So I'm the state chair of that organisation, and then I'm heavily involved with the school as well, the school community. So I've got 2 kids at a school, and I'm involved in various different levels at the school to support them where I can, and give back to what is, a tremendous school environment for not only my kids, but for all the kids coming through. So it's varied. It's across a few different things.
Well, congratulations on that work.
Thanks. I love it. It's really important to me. So, that's part of the message to the mums that I work with. When you're doing your values, what's really important to you. You don't have to go back full time. You don't need to go back full time. You don't have to go back full time. How do you want to live your life? Because this is your life.
And a lot of that stuff's more, maybe not more rewarding, but just as rewarding as any work anyway, giving.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you feel that you want to share that I haven't asked you about today?
Gosh, I think we've probably covered it all. The bottom line for me is just I just want mums to know that there's actually a very straightforward path to going back to work. It might not seem obvious and it might not seem clear, but when they feel completely overwhelmed and stuck and going nowhere and living Groundhog Day, as I call it, I just want them to know that there absolutely is a path forward for them. They can do it.
Okay. And I just wanted to highlight, you've got a confidence workshop, and if anyone wants to go through that, what does that consist of? So
that's a free workshop that I run. I've got one coming up on the 6th of May, and that's a 1-hour masterclass. So I take them through, we do practical exercises so that at the end of that hour, they will already be able to measure a difference in their confidence levels. So I take them through a series of different exercises around their skills, around their fears, and around their future kind of steps and sorts of skills that they think that they might be using. So they're a very practical 1-hour session where we get to talk and interact and share our experiences.
Okay, and if people wanted to find that and also connect with you online, where's the best place for people to find you?
Probably via my email, Diana, Diana, at backtoworkroadmap.com, or my website, www.backtoworkroadmap.com, or my Instagram, backtowork.coach. And all of those will advertise the Confidence Masterclass that runs regularly. So that, if they miss the 6th of May one, there's another one coming up after that.
Sounds good. Diana Cregan, thank you very much for your time today.
You are so welcome, Thomas. It's been such a pleasure.